Mesechta Megillah Chaf Aleph on the base 21b, Baker Street, 221b. So all of us, we get an Aliya in the Torah today. So, of course, it's a big honor to have an Aliya. And we all say a bracha, Baruch Hu Hashem, Hamvarach. You make a blessing before the Aliya. Baruch Hashem, and everyone answers, Baruch Hashem, Hamvarach, L'olam Va'ed. Everyone makes a bracha, a blessing before the Aliya. Everyone makes a blessing after they get an Aliya. This was not always the case. There were times when only the first person to get an Aliya, which is a Kohen, would make the blessing before, and the last person to get an Aliya will make the bracha after. We said it has to do with two things, with one thing, and the Gemara will add a second thing. One thing is that nowadays you have one Bal Koreh, one person reading the Torah out loud for everyone. You don't have each person reading their own Aliyah, and therefore everyone has to be connected in some way, and they should actually, according to the Rush, they must read the Aliyah, read the Torah together with the Bal Koreh, with the reader of the Torah, word for word. According to the Rush, if you didn't read together with the Bal Koreh, you're not Yotze, you've not fulfilled your obligation. So it's important to actually read the words in audible voice that you yourself could hear it. There's another reason the Gemara will give. So says the Gemara, the Gemara quoted our Mishnah, which says that the first person to get an Aliyah to the Torah. So let's say it's Shabbos, you're calling up 7 people. Or a Monday, like today, you called up 3 people. And the Mishnah says, only the first one says a blessing before the Aliyah, and the last one says a blessing after the Aliyah. So the first one to get an Aliyah, he reads the first blessing. And the last one to get an Aliyah reads the last blessing. And everybody else does not read any bracha, any blessing. And obviously, it's very important not to speak at all throughout the entire Torah reading, because if you do, you're missing out some of the words of Kriyas HaTorah, Torah reading, you're also making the bracha, the blessing should be in vain, levatala, because you didn't hear the entire Torah reading. Says the Gemara, even in the times of the Mishnah, even in times of the Gemara, nowadays, the custom is, and what it seems like over here from this Gemara, is that in the times of the Mishnah, before the times of the Gemara, everybody was perfect in shul. Nobody came late, nobody left early. That's what it seems like. Similar to, like it says in Mesechta Brachas, that the early Chassidim really literally means a pious, a Hasid, a kind person, someone that's Chassidim Koinei. They would come an hour before davening by Shachris, Mincha, and Ma'ariv to get ready for davening. And they would spend an hour after davening, sort of recovering from davening, and then they would spend an hour davening. They would daven for 9 hours a day. So those people always came to shul early, left after it was done, a long time, and they were there throughout the entire davening. Later on, wasn't the Rishonim in the later generations. People were like today, their attention spans perhaps got shorter. And some people, shocker, actually came late to shul. Can you imagine that? Nobody does such a thing. So says the Gemara, the Kuli Mevarch Lefnei Lachareha. So every single person who gets an Aliyah says the bracha of the Torah before and after. So if you have 3 Aliyahs, 3 people make a bracha, 7 Aliyahs, 7 maftir. Why does everyone make their own bracha beforehand and afterhand and afterwards? It's tzircha d'tzibura, taking up time from the congregation. Especially nowadays, how every shul loves to make Misha Beirachs. So it takes up even more time from everybody. There's a reason for it. Why did the sages say that every single person must make their own bracha when they get an aliyah beforehand and afterwards? It was a decree because some people enter shul later after Torah reading started, and some people leave shul early before Torah reading finished. And so if somebody comes to shul and they're called for an aliyah and they came late, so then they only are going to hear the bracha afterwards, not the bracha before. If somebody got an aliyah, let's say he got the second aliyah, and they left right after their aliyah, and they're leaving shul early, they're not going to hear the bracha after. So since there's some people which are not in shul the entire time, they might come late after Kriya started, or leave early before Kriya ended, and they're going to read the Torah without saying a bracha, without hearing the bracha. So therefore they said that every single person has to make their own bracha to the Torah. So you think that you're going to save time by coming late to shul, we end up having every single person must make their own bracha. So therefore, to be yotze, every single person has to make their own blessing on the Torah. Continues the Gemara. Now the Gemara is going to go through the different Torah readings throughout the year. Just going to go through shortly some of the minhagim, some of the customs, Chabad customs specifically, when it comes to getting Aliyah in shul. We get Aliyah in shul. Our Chabad custom is different than many other people, but there's reasoning behind each one. Is we open the Sefer Torah. Other circles, they just literally look at the Torah. They don't actually kiss it, but we actually take the corner of our talis, or we take those who don't have a talis, we take the belt of the Sefer Torah, the gartel, and we touch the place of the Torah reading. And some people actually touch only the beginning of the Torah reading. Our Chabad custom is to touch the beginning to the end. And Chabad custom is that we're not so worried about interruption beforehand, and therefore we touch the beginning, the end, and we close the Torah. So we make a bracha on the Torah, the blessing, and then we open the Torah. Because we're saying it's more important that the bracha, the blessing, should be on a closed Torah. It's respectful not to have a Torah open. Like, for example, you'll go to many museums around the world, and unfortunately, but they have Torahs on display, and the Torah is open to a certain parsha. And halakhically, I mean, it's not very respectful for the Torah to be a museum artifact. The Torah is a living thing. So a Torah is supposed to be chasum v'tzaror. It's supposed to be closed as much as it can. So when someone's making a bracha, a blessing on the Torah, the Chabad custom is that we close the Torah, we make the bracha on it. And because of that, we touch the beginning and the end of the Torah reading, and also the Rebbe will touch the beginning again. Close the Torah, we make the bracha, we open it up, and then the Torah reader usually points to the place and starts the Torah reading, and whoever is getting an Aliyah reads along. Custom of other circles is that they're very makbid, very particular not to make an interruption between the bracha, the blessing, and the beginning of the reading. As the Gemara literally just said a few lines before, every blessing in a mitzvah has to be is called Iver La'asiyasan, right before doing the mitzvah. Where's it? Iver? Here, Iver La'asiyasan. Every bracha is prior to the performance. And they say if you make too much of an interruption from the blessing to the mitzvah, then it's a bracha levatala, it's a blessing in vain, or at least b'di'evet, at least it's not the best case scenario. So therefore, they say they look at the place of the Torah reading. Some of them will kiss just the beginning, and then they'll make the blessing while the Torah is open, in order not to have an interruption between the bracha, the blessing, and the mitzvah. And then they'll start the Torah reading, and the same thing after. They'll make the blessing after the Torah reading is over, directly after the Aliya is done. They might look at the Torah reading, they might kiss it, depends on the custom, and then they'll make the bracha after. And our Chabad minhag is that we actually kiss again with the gartel, the belt of the Torah, or a corner of our talis, the end, the beginning, the end, close it, and make the bracha. We say true, you should not make an interruption, but since what you're doing is l'kaved, it's an honor of the Torah, it's not considered an interruption between the blessing and the actual mitzvah, which is the reading of the Torah reading. And before and after, there is the blessings, which are Baruch Atah Hashem Asher Bachar Banu, which is a present term because you're about to do the mitzvah. The nasa, and afterwards you say Asher Nasan Lanu, that he gave to us. It's a past tense after the mitzvah is done. If you made a mistake and you said Asher Nasan Lanu instead of Asher Bachar, meaning you said the second blessing instead of the first blessing before the Aliya. So if you remember before, you said the Hashem, which is at the end of the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Nosein HaTorah. If you remembered before that, so then you go back and you repeat the from the words Asher Bachar Banu. So if you start saying Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam before the Aliya, Asher Nas Lanu Terem Res Emes Chai Olam Matav B'Tzchenu Baruch Atah, and then you remembered you're saying the bracha for, you're supposed to say the other blessing, you go straight back to Asher Bachar, because you didn't yet say Hashem's name, and the beginning is going on the right bracha. If you already said Baruch Atah Hashem Nosein HaTorah, and you're about to, then you realize that you said the wrong bracha, so then you just finish the bracha, because the endings of these two blessings, the one before and after, are the same. Baruch Atah Hashem Nosein HaTorah. And Maril, he was a Rishon, he does write that you should make a second bracha, finish that one, you don't have to say Baruch Shem, make a second bracha, because it's very important to talk about the Bechira, that Hashem chose us, Mikol Ha'amim, from all the nations. So you should, according to the Maharil, you should say the first bracha again, but Shulchan Aruch says, Safek brachas lahakel, when you're in a doubt, you don't repeat a bracha again, and therefore, if you said the wrong bracha beforehand, you don't say another blessing. There's another aspect, another detail at play called tircha de tzibura. You don't want to take too much time from the congregation. You know, people are in shul waiting. You can't just make them waiting. It's not a political speech where everyone can wait for hours. And therefore, before the Aliya, many people don't close the Torah because it's tircha tzibura. To close it and reopen it takes up time. And after the Aliya, you anyways have to be going to move the Torah between one person and the other person. And therefore, they do close the Torah afterwards. At the end of the day, there's many different minhagim, many different customs. Everyone should go according to the custom of the shoulder that they go to, they're used to. There's different Torah readings. Monday, Thursday, Shabbos Mincha, we explained three psukim, 3 verses. 3 aliyahs, 3 people getting called up to the Torah, minimum of 10 verses, as the Gemara already went through. On a day where there's extra korban musaf, then you have another extra aliyah. So in Rosh Chodesh, you have a 4th aliyah. Chol Hamoed, you also have a korban musaf, you have a 4th aliyah as well. Yom Tov, you have more karbanis, even more sacrifices, more different karban musaf, greater than Rosh Chodesh in the first of the month. In addition, it's Asar Basis Melacha, people cannot work, and therefore they have more time. They're in shul at any rate, because there's no work to run to on holidays on Yom Tov. So on Yom Tov, which is Rosh Hashanah, which is Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, on those days we add a fifth Aliya, a fifth Torah reading, give extra karbanis, plus extra prohibitions. Yom Kippur, you have, in addition to all the other karban musafs, you have an extra few karbanis. One goes to Hashem, one to the Azazel, and it's also a Isser Kares if one does Malacha. Plus, it's a Isser Achila, you're not allowed to eat or drink on Yom Kippur. It's called Shabbos Shabbosim, the Shabbos of all Shabboses. And therefore, we add a sixth Aliyah to show how it's holier than the other holidays, the other Yom Tovim. And of course, Shabbos is even above Yom Kippur, and therefore Shabbos we have 7 Aliyahs. The Gemara, the next few Gemaras are going to be a little, like, say, technical. We're going to go through the different Torah readings of the different days, saying how we divide, how many aliyahs we get, and how we fit in the amount of aliyahs we're trying to put in every single Torah reading. So, for example, the Torah reading of Rosh Chodesh is a very unique Torah reading. That's going to be the next discussion, the Torah reading of Rosh Chodesh. Just have to find it while we do it. Every Aliyah has to be a topic. We'll get to it soon. Every Torah reading has to be a topic from beginning to end, meaning you can't cut off mid-sentence. You don't say, and Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, stop, end of Aliyah. You need to say, Hashem said this and this and that. So on Rosh Chodesh, we read in the Torah 3 paragraphs. Let me show you. Do it like this. Tikkun Karim Pinchas. Let's go like this. Just looking for the Tikkun Karim. Nope. Chabad of Beverly Hills. Looking for that one. Here it is. Chabad of Beverly Hills. On Rosh Chodesh, we said you have 4 aliyahs. Because it's a holier day than the average Monday and Thursday. Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Karp. Trying to open up Pinchas. Oh, it's not working anymore. I used to work always this website. I didn't care. There are 3 paragraphs in the Torah, 3 breaks. Interesting. Very interesting. I'll get to it soon. Whatever. Here it is. So here's a Torah. This is Parshas Pinchas. This is the reading of Rosh Chodesh. We read three different parts. First one is Vaydaber Hashem. This is the daily carbon. It's called the carbon tamid, the daily sacrifice in the Beis Hamikdash. Second one paragraph we read is B'Yom HaShabbos. On Shabbos, we bring an extra carbon musaf. Every single day, you brought 2 sheep as a carbon, 2 lambs as a carbon in the Beis Hamikdash, a sacrifice, one in the morning, one in the evening. This is the first paragraph. The second paragraph is Rosh Chodesh. On Shabbos, Yom HaShabbos, you bring another 2 karbanos. It's called the carbon musaf, an extra sacrifice. On Rosh Chodesh, on the first of the month, you brought another several karbanos, an extra carbon musaf. So we read 3 different paragraphs. We need to call 4 people to the Torah. Now, we don't stop an Aliya in the mid-sentence, mid-topic. It has to be a place where you can make a pause and start the next paragraph. The best place to make a break for an Aliya is before a paragraph starts, because that's for sure a new topic. 99% in the Torah, it's a new topic. You do have exceptions where in the middle of a pasuk, in the middle of a verse, you'll have a new paragraph. That's few and far in between. But generally, a new paragraph is a new topic, and that's a good place to make a break for an Aliya. Now, with 3 paragraphs here, ideally, you should have 3 different people getting the Aliya in 3 paragraphs. But we have a few technical issues. Look at the second paragraph. It talks about on Shabbos. On the day of Shabbos, we bring shnei chavasim, 2 sheep, which are non-blemished, and flour. Every single Shabbos, this is a burnt carbon, a burnt offering on the Mizbeach. What's a problem with this, Aliya? With this paragraph? It's only 2 psukim, 2 verses. And of course, as the Gemara just said, that we need at least 3 psukim per Aliya. And we said, we gave a whole list of reasons why we need 3. Right? We said 3 are for Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim, Kohen Levi Yisrael. There are all these different reasons why you need at least 3 aliyahs, and each aliyah has to be at least 3 psukim. And we said other reasons why we need to have at least altogether 10 verses, 10 psukim. We gave different reasons. Each one corresponds to a different time we read the Torah. So therefore, paragraph number 2 that we read on Rosh Chodesh is only 2 psukim, only 2 verses. And we can't give an Aliya just of that. Paragraph number 3 is 5 psukim, 5 verses. So it's big enough to be its own Aliya, its own calling to the Torah. It's not big enough to be its own Torah reading. It's only 5 psukim. And if you're calling up 4 people and each one needs at least 3 psukim, you need 12 verses to be called you need at least 12 verses. So just to Rosh Chodesh, Torah reading is not enough to be its own Torah reading entirely on Rosh Chodesh. So you have to add on, you have to have at least 12 verses. So to go back 12 verses, you have to start from over here. Therefore, you need all 3 paragraphs. Paragraph number 1 is big enough to be its own Aliya. Paragraph number 2 is not 3 psukim, is not big enough to be its own Aliya. Paragraph number 3 is big enough to be its own Aliya. So we're going to make paragraph number 3 its own Aliya, and therefore that's on Rosh Chodesh. On the first of the month, we have 4 Aliyahs, 4 people called. This paragraph will be Aliya number 4, and that's the way we do it. Now we have 10 psukim, 10 verses, and we have to divide it among 3 different aliyahs. Now, if it was all 1 paragraph, it's not so hard. You divide equally. However, 1 paragraph, paragraph number 1 is 8 psukim, 8 verses. Paragraph number 2 is only 2 psukim, 2 verses. And we want to keep 2 rules, that every aliyah must be at least 3 psukim, 3 verses, plus You want to not stop mid-sentence. You want to stop when it's a plausible place to make sense that you could pause over there. So how do we divide 3 aliyahs between these 10 verses, 10 psukim, which are divided into 2 paragraphs? Just want to point out one thing because somebody asked me individually. Psukim verses were divided by Moshe Rabbeinu. It's old tradition. These are from Moshe Rabbeinu, all the verses. Parsha, what we know as a parsha, we have 53 parshas of the Torah, right? List of parshas, what we're familiar with. Right, list of parshas. What was it? Sorry, list of parshas. Right, what we're familiar with as a list of parshas is not really a parsha in a typical sense of the word. Right? Let's say it like this. Here's a list of parshas that we have. It's not really a parsha. Literally means a paragraph. Back in the day, when everybody would be learning, right? There's a list of the parshas. When everyone would be learning, we didn't have printed chumashim. We had very few books written in general. So what we did have was only the Torah written like this, literally a Torah, scrolls. So every parsha was a paragraph, and every paragraph had its title. And everybody, even a child, when they learned, they were fluent in a parsha, means in the paragraph of Tzavas B'nai Yisrael. Right, so they would call this a parsha of Tzavas Karbani Lachmi, or Tzav the Tamid, Tzav of the daily sacrifice. This parsha was called V'yam HaShabbos. They weren't parshas in the typical sense of the word, like we have 53 parshas of the Torah. You have hundreds of parshas. So the parsha of the weekly reading, that was divided, say, by Moshe Rabbeinu, or perhaps by Ezra, depends. That's a parsha of the weekly reading. But a parsha per se in the Torah is a paragraph, and that's given to us psuchos and stumas, including if it's a new line or if it's a half a line. That goes back like a half a line like this between paragraphs, or if it's a new line. That was given to us from Moshe Rabbeinu. Now we have a tradition. Prakim chapters, that's a new addition, which was introduced, they say, by the clergy, by the different priests and whatever over the years. That's the Prakim chapters and verse number. Pasuk Aleph, Hatzvi-Bais, chapter and verse number were introduced later on by different clergy throughout the years. The Rebbe does say that since it's been accepted Jewish custom, accepted Jewish practice, to reference these numbers, you must say there's holiness involved in it as well. We can learn things from it. However, that wasn't from a Jewish source per se. That's why you'll have in this past week's Parsha of Eira, for example, you had the Eira starts Pasuk Beis, verse 2 of whatever chapter it is, because the clergy just divided according to topic, and they decided that the last pasuk, the last verse of the Parsha Shemos, of the previous week's Parsha, starts a new chapter, and Eira starts verse 2. So the Prakim, chapter 28, verse 1, that is from not a Jewish source. But the psukim, division of verses, this pasuk starts here, ends here. That is coming from Moshe Rabbeinu. That is a tradition from Moses. Now, time flies by when we're having fun. We'll pause we'll pause over here the Gemara. That's going to be the topic of the Gemara, dividing up these 10 verses in a fair way of 3 aliyahs. And the way we do it is only time that we actually do it is we repeat verse 3. That's the only way we're actually able to do it. Repeat verse 3. a second time. We're coming up to a very big day. This Shabbos, Amir Hashem, it's Yud Shvat, the 10th of Shvat. It's a very special day on the Chabad calendar. On Yud Shvat is the Histalkus, the passing of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and of course the beginning of the Darashvi, beginning of the Rebbe accepting the leadership of Chabad Chassidim. I have here in my house, very interestingly, the Shlita Kuntras, the Frierdiker Rebbe, previous Rebbe. He used to give out Kuntresim. When the Frierdiker Rebbe was younger, I just wanted to let's go through the Rebbe Drive, Frierdiker Rebbe here. Here, I'll go through some photos of the Frierdiker Rebbe. These are all the photos that we have today, publicized. There might be more than that, just never saw the light of day, of the Frierdiker Rebbe. This is the first picture of the Frierdiker Rebbe. This is about the year 1910. This is when he's still the son of the Rebbe Rashab, head of the Yeshiva Talmid Torah. See, sorry. That's the earliest known picture we have of the Frierdiker Rebbe. We exit this. Here, X. This is a second picture before the Frierdiker Rebbe left Russia. He was expelled by the communists. He gave out this picture to a chassid named Reb Chaim Zalman Kozliner Chazak, and he told them the chassidim in Russia would like to have his picture. This is a picture the Frierdiker Rebbe gave to them, taken in Leningrad. I think taken in his home. Frierdiker Rebbe unfortunately suffered many illnesses throughout his life. He had to go to many sanatoriums. Wasn't always able to afford it, unfortunately, with the hardships and the depression when he lost all the support of the yeshivas, chassidim in Russia having nothing, etc. This is the Frierdiker Rebbe. He also suffered from a form of MS, where he slowly became more paralyzed with the years. And the Frierdiker Rebbe, you can see as the pictures go, he became more and more, unfortunately, not physically strong throughout the years. You can see a video from the Frierdiker Rebbe when he comes to America in 1929. Contrast that with when the Frierdiker Rebbe arriving in America, 1929. In contrast, so when the Frierdiker Rebbe arrived in America in 1939. Here it is. Is this it? No, this is when the Rebbe arrived in America. And you can see a very big difference just in the 10 years in the health of the Frierdiker Rebbe. So this is the year 1939 when the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America.
An excerpt from the new gem. Commissioner Hurley, representing Mayor LaGuardia and Attorney Sam Craig. They were heading out to meet the Rebbe while he's still with the ship. The driving home was a ship-flying neutral Swedish flag. So during the war, it was able to sail through the European seas. Although it was
Sure, what's happening here?
among the people who went on board was a news photographer who took a famous photo of the Rebbe sitting in his stateroom wearing
Sure, what's happening here exactly?
his first trimel before he gets off the ship. Rabbi Binyamin Williger, a prominent Munkacher Chassid,
recently told the Mind Counter Project about his memories of this event.
Der Rebbe kommt in Amerika zu Schiff. Der Schiff ist reingekommen. Ist aber so, das Ding,
Okay, I'm sorry, it's a little bit choppy here. Trying to find it.
Yitzhak Ronen was present at the pier when the Rebbe arrived. Several years ago, he shared his memories of this momentous occasion.
I was a young kid.
At any rate, Frierdiker Rebbe, is a video of him when he came in 1929 to
An
Melavanaka.
excerpt from the new Gem film, featuring the films of the sixth Lubavitch.
But you see, Frierdiker Rebbe at that point was walking. Here's a Frierdiker Rebbe in Philadelphia. So I think that's Independence Hall. Frierdiker Rebbe went around to many cities in the U.S. during that first trip to the United States. And throughout when Frierdiker Rebbe had to escape from the Nazis and he came back to America in 1929, at that point, Frierdiker Rebbe was wheeled off the ship, he wasn't walking. Here's going a couple of years later. It's a Rebbe and the Frierdiker Rebbe, famous picture of them playing chess together. And you see, here's a Frierdiker Rebbe when he came 10 years later to, he was being wheeled off the ship. His health was very, very fragile. You can imagine everything the Frierdiker Rebbe was going through. In addition, the Frierdiker Rebbe also, during the Holocaust, he had many, many relatives. His own children were killed in the Holocaust, killed by the Nazis. And many, 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 many relatives, plus thousands of Chassidim, or hundreds of thousands of Chassidim, you could say. Hundreds of thousands of Chabad Chassidim were killed in the Holocaust. Definitely tens of thousands. In 1945, the Frierdiker Rebbe even had a stroke after the Holocaust, which was mamish. He had a very hard time speaking. There is one recording or two recordings of the Frierdiker Rebbe existent, which is very hard to understand the words. He had a very hard time speaking. So from when the Frierdiker Rebbe was in Israel, Eretz Yisrael, there's only one picture of him in Israel. I think this picture was taken in Israel. No, it's Riga. There's one picture from Frierdiker Rebbe in Israel. Frierdiker Rebbe was in Eretz Yisrael in 1929 and was saying Maimarim for many hours and speaking, like you see over here in Philadelphia in 1930, which is Ches Tevis, so a few days from today. Interesting. Instead of that, sorry, Ches Shvat. Instead of that, the Frierdiker Rebbe wasn't able to speak at all after a stroke. So the Frierdiker Rebbe cannot say new Maimarim. Those who went into Yechidus at a private audience with the Frierdiker Rebbe, they needed someone to read, to sort of repeat. Rabbi Rothstein usually would do it, to repeat the words of the Frierdiker Rebbe. So the new Maimarim of the Frierdiker Rebbe, which will come out then, was no longer Maimarim which were being said for new. Even when the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote at that point, his handwriting was not as strong, was unfortunately very shaky. You see the Frierdiker Rebbe's diary entries from before his stroke in 1945 and after. There was a letter the Frierdiker Rebbe received during the war describing what happened in Riga, where the Frierdiker Rebbe escaped from, how many of the Chassidim were killed barbarically by the Nazis, and when they they're in the Frierdiker Rebbe's home, and suddenly they heard a thud coming from the Frierdiker Rebbe's room. The Frierdiker Rebbe fainted. From then on, the Rebbe, our Rebbe, became sort of the censor, watching which mail came into the Frierdiker Rebbe, which one left, to make sure that no depressing news comes into the Frierdiker Rebbe. A Yid who, unfortunately, had he had the tsaras, the troubles of Am Yisrael on him. And the Frierdiker Rebbe was not able to speak and say Maimarim in the way he would do in Russia in Poland. And when the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America, his health was very, very weak, unfortunately. The Frierdiker Rebbe actually spent a lot of time, even in America, in different health sanatoriums. Morristown, he spent a while, went to Lakewood, he went to other places as well, in Far Rockaway, several places the Frierdiker Rebbe went to, just for his health. Because of that, Mamarim, teachings of Chassidus, which the Rebbe would say, because of that, what they would do is they would take Mamarim that were said by the Frierdiker Rebbe in previous years, mainly in the 20s and 30s, and they would write it out, type it out, bring them to the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe would sometimes write the beginning, he would write an end, he would change a little bit of the Maimer, and then they would publish the old Mamarim. So the old Mamarim were being published in Contrasim in pamphlets. The pamphlets were always given out for special occasions, and there's 3 Svarim called Sefer and Marim Contrasim, 3 books of the pamphlets which were from the Frierdiker Rebbe's Mamarim. And one of the pamphlets they were usually arranged well over a year in advance. The Rebbe was in charge of Kahas, our Rebbe, he was in charge of the publication society, all Chabad publications, and therefore our Rebbe, he prepared well over a year, even a year after the Frierdiker Rebbe's Estalkos passing, there's still Mamarim from the Frierdiker Rebbe that were coming out and being published because they were prepared in advance. Matter of fact, there's one for the Siyam HaKadosh, for the finishing of Kaddish of the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe would proofread every single one of these Mamarim and then bring it to the Frierdiker Rebbe to look it over as well. Here you see, this is 1943. See, the Frierdiker Rebbe, unfortunately, it had to be wheeled in, a wheelchair. It's a unique wheelchair, wooden wheelchair. Still in the Frierdiker Rebbe's Yechidus room till today, you could see it. This is a dinner for the yeshiva. For the day of Yud Shvat, the Frierdiker Rebbe's grandmother's Yahrzeit. And for that day, there was a Maimer that was ready to be put out for that day. Just want to do this. Somebody just passed away literally 2 years ago. Milton Kramer sings for Frierdiker Rebbe. Just find that. Here. Let's find this video over here. Here's the Frierdiker Rebbe. This is 1930, a video of the Frierdiker Rebbe.
After 11 exhausting months in the United States, the Rebbe is now about to head back to Riga, and a farewell gathering is being held at the home of Reb Chaim Zalman Kramer. The closest rabbis, donors, and friends are here.
Sure, what's happening here? If this helps.
After 11 exhausting months in the United States, The Rebbe is now about to head back to Riga, and a farewell gathering is being held at the home of Reb Chaim Zalman Kramer. The closest rabbis, donors, and friends are here. Rabbi Rifkin, Rabbi Kazanovsky, Rabbi Jacobson, the hosts, the Kramers,
Mrs. Elke Kramer, the matriarch, wife of the late Moshe Leib Kramer. The Rebbe.
That's a Frierdiker Rebbe in 1930. It's a young and healthy Rebbe.
Host Chazak helps the Rebbe to his chair.
that's Rabbi Mendel Lakshin at the right, an office of Agudas Chabad.
In the last 11 months, the Rebbe visited several major U.S. cities, including Philadelphia, Baltimore, Chicago, Milwaukee, Detroit, St. Louis, Boston, and even the White House in Washington, D.C. Sam Kramer, the MC. The famous Chassid Reb David Shifrin.
It's a grandfather of Label Shifrin from formerly Pittsburgh. It's his grandfather. And if you know, he's a police officer, David Shifrin in Pittsburgh. It's also his grandfather.
A few years ago, as part of the My Encounter with the Rebbe project, Milton Kramer, a son of Chazak, reminisced about this event.
My uncle, Sam Kramer, was a camera buff and he took pictures of silent movies.
Spotlight of the camera is very bright. A few years ago, as part of the My Encounter with the Rebbe project, Milton Kramer, a son of Chazak, reminisced about this event.
My uncle, Sam Kramer, was a camera buff and he took pictures of silent movies. And those are the movies that we turned over to Lubavitch, and it's part of the record. I was actually 10 years old. And my father, he gave me a nudge. He said, Michal, zing, zing, zing. And that's what happened. All the Panay of Manhattan were there, New York, well-known rabbis, and also well-known lay leaders. Because my uncle was, were pretty well-known as a supporter of the Lubavitch and also as an Orthodox family.
During the trip, the Rebbe wrote a letter to his daughter, David Mushka, and her husband, the Rebbe. He writes, "The trip, thank God, has caused a tremendous awakening for Yiddishkeit, and is bringing practical results. The work here in America is a bit like at home, in Russia, awakening the people. I am very pleased about this, more than pleased. Amongst the American youth, there are many very good, very refined individuals, straightforward people who are able to absorb. They yearn to hear warm words. With God's help, tens of thousands of Americans can be brought to Torah Yiddishkeit."
Right, so in short, that's a Frierdiker Rebbe. So the Mamorim of the Frierdiker Rebbe at that point were being written and were being republished. And for the Yud Shvat, it's a yahrzeit of the grandmother of the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe said a certain minor from the year 1923 should be published and add on the words in the beginning, Basi Lagani. I came to my garden. And it was a 4-part mimer, very, very long mimer, 20 paragraphs, 20 chapters. And it was divided to be published over 4 different dates. One was a 10th of Shvat, one was a 13th of Shvat, 3 days later, Frierdiker Rebbe's mother's yard site, Rebbe Zinshterner Sarah, buried in New York, where the oil is. And then 2 dates for later on, which I didn't yet decide, it ended up being for Purim and Pesach, because it was already after the Stalkos, after the passing of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And it was 20, it's altogether 20 chapters in the Maimer, and therefore there's 5 chapters that were published for each of these dates. Now, of course, at Tzaddik, a holy person, nothing happens without their consent. And nothing happens to them without their knowledge as well, including the passing of Frierdiker Rebbe, knowing, and therefore, if he published a Maimer, that it should be published the day he passes away, it means that's his message to us for the future. There was a certain chassid whose child was, had a daughter, was supposed to get married a little bit after Yud Shvat, after the passing of the Frierdiker Rebbe. He asked the Rebbe, our Rebbe, should he make the wedding or should he push it off because of the Avelus, because of the mourning of the Frierdiker Rebbe? And he said that in the Maimer, Basi Lagani, the Rebbe answered, you have the word chasana. Talks about the joy of a chassan and a kala, a bride and a groom. And the Frierdiker Rebbe is answering you, they should not push off the wedding. So every single thing is very unique. There was a certain, not going to do the whole story, but a certain person who was nichidus by the Frierdiker Rebbe for a certain trouble that they had, a Rabbi Bashol in the Bronx. And when the nichidus was over, when the private meeting was over, Frierdiker Rebbe was very thoughtful for a few minutes, and then he turned to him and he says, could you do me a favor, please? Could he come back again in 3 Sundays from now? And he said, yeah. He didn't understand why. When he came back 3 Sundays later, he saw a huge crowd outside 770, and he asked, what is it? He said, this is a levaya. This is a funeral of the Frierdiker Rebbe. So, of course, every single thing that takes place with the Rebbe is exact, and they know what, they know what they're doing. And the Rebbe himself explained many times that at Tzaddik, nothing happens to them without their agreement. And therefore, the fact that the Maimer of Basi Lagani was given out on Yud Shvat, 10th of Shvat, it's very unique and very special. And for the next few days, we'll go through ideas of Yud Shvat